this is weird. They just ask, right? Like kind of a tokenism. Yeah, we feel like that. We went to them, we said that, and they were like, we're glad you told us that. We didn't realize it. They're like, we don't want you to do that anymore. And we knew these are great people. We identified that there was a need for this understanding. And we said, we think within our company, there's a want for this. And we said, we want to start a group around education pieces for Native and Indigenous. And we started that process.
Can you tell us like a little bit about yourself?
So I work for a media company, Nielsen. So we have kind of charter groups within the company that allow us to educate and advocate around certain social issues. And so mine is for Native American, tribal, and Indigenous issues or voices, and we call it NATIV. I guess it's kind of our acronym in there. So I'm one of the co-founders and the leaders of that group. So what we do there and what I do there is we have a passion for advocacy and education around Native and Indigenous issues. So I spend not a lot of time, if my managers are watching here, I spend a fair amount of time in that space and kind of educating and advocating within our company. And actually it's become especially outside of our company, kind of applying my personal passion. So just my personal journey to understand who I am and my history and my culture, as I'm connecting to that and helping to bring those insights and those pieces I'm connecting and learning those truths into other people's lives in my workspace as well as my personal space, so my friends, my children. So I grew up in the city. I didn't grow up on the reservation. I would visit back home on the reservation with my father on the summers or kind of in spring trips or for the powwows and the grand entries or fishing open or stuff like that. So I was tangentially connected. But as a young person, I didn't necessarily grow up with a real strong identity, I guess, in the Indigenous space. You start asking these questions as part of the maturation process of most human beings. For me, I started to actively run towards that. And as I started to go through that journey and that discovery and had the beauty of my culture, to me was like, man, why was I missed this opportunity and this time and that type of stuff. And all these things, light bulbs were coming on, and I started finding like amazing content creators to help me understand a little bit more things I didn't know, and reading books and talking more to my relatives and just gaining these insights. And this journey that I'm going on, I wanted to bring more and more people, and that culminate in an opportunity at my company, ending in this formation of this group that we call NATIV. And the last couple of years, I've been able to do that at my work. So that's who I am kind of personally, and that's how kind of connected with me at work in this group that we call NATIV.
Do you feel like there was like a specific defining moment, like some type of event or like something that triggered that change in direction?
Yeah. When my mom passed.
Okay.
Actually. When she passed, that was kind of, you start to realize, life is short. She passed when she was young and pretty quickly and suddenly. And I just realized I'd lost a resource that I thought was always going to be there, a connection. I was always going to have, I was going to be able to ask questions, and it was gone. You know what I mean? It was gone. So then I started to realize in Brazil, I was going to have to start doing that on my own. And so that amplified that. So that was like kind of the beginning of should become more important to me. I don't have all this time in the world that I'm not going to have my aunts and my grandparents and these people. So that became more important. And so that's kind of, I'd say that was the spark, the catalyst of that specific thing. And then kind of along the process of moving through her things, she kept kind of a lot of books about Indigenous history, different mythologies or histories and about our tribes and our family back in Dakota, and then my family in Leech Lake and right after I'm in Lake. And the fellowship that she had that was important to her in that event, that this should be important to me because it was important to her, and that kind of amplified it.
Your story is so incredibly inspiring, and I think that it speaks a lot to how our personal motivators and the personal journeys that we each have, we bring those with us to our work. You have the NATIV working group at Nielsen, and that's like how like you bring your personal stories and your passions to the working group, and all those like are driven through your personal life. And I find that in the business to business space, when we're working in a business corporation capacity, I feel like there's a lot of, maybe it's just in my case, I don't know if this is your case too, but like pressure to like separate the business and personal. I'm not sure if that's the case with the culture at At Nielsen, it is like a very common sort of expectation, I suppose, to separate business and personal, when really I feel like that's a detriment. Want to know what your take is on that.
In the beginning of NATIV, how we ended up becoming a group, there was just kind of like a blast out there. So we have a couple of different newsletters that go out, and in every one of them, there was like a call to anybody who identifies as an Indigenous person to contribute to a study we were doing with a partnership with Illuminative, the nonprofit, where they're doing a study on mascots. And ultimately, I think more than a mascot, I think is what the campaign ended up doing. And they were talking about like the harm of mascots and Indigenous representation in media. And so they had done the whole study. We were coming at the very end. And of all of the people, I guess, that they had reached out there, 2 people showed up for that. Myself and later on my co-founder, Eric Tweed, showed up to that. We weren't 100% sure what it was, but they essentially just wanted an internal point of view of the results of this. So they sat down and they said, we're going to release this data. We just want to know from a personal perspective, what is your point of view? So they shared the data with us, and we gave testimonials, we did videos, and we found just the small group we were in, just sharing our point of view, they were just very interested and had no real frame of reference. Honestly, they had just not interacted with people of Indigenous backgrounds. It just was not a thing. They have kind of very distant point of view, television or news media of what we go through. They were very supportive. They were a champion ally, I would say. It's who they were. So we did the videos with them. And that was an interesting experience because they had asked us to do something with it. Myself and Eric, we had actually gone to the side and said, this is weird. They just asked, right? And it actually, we say it kind of bordered along this like kind of a tokenism kind of question they'd asked us. And him and I were right in the same line. We're like, yeah, we feel like that. We went to them, we said that. And they were like, we're glad you told us that. We didn't realize it. They're like, we don't want you to do that anymore. And we knew these are great people. We identified that there was a need for this understanding. And we said, we think within our company, there's a want for this. And we said, we want to start a group around education pieces for Native and Indigenous. And we started that process.
Jerrell, you started talking about the process for getting the Native working group started. It sounded like Nielsen has like a structure in place already. Is that did that make it easier for you? Like you just had to follow those the application, or it's like more for educating allies as well, and like what they can do and helping celebrate the culture and lots of different things. So how did you identify like what those goals and objectives for Native was at the beginning, and have those goals kind of shifted at all?
So we have what are called like pillars of these groups. So this might have been a helpful way to give them structure, but each one has to be unique. So we have advocacy, community, education, and business. So those are 4 pillars you should operate. Each one has to be kind of focused within your charter. And we want to see an increase in the Indigenous community of Nielsen as a viable employer. I just don't think our roles aren't actively promoted in those communities. And right now, I've met with the head of global acquisition, and we are creating a list of employment agencies that we can go and start posting jobs on their job boards right now. I think actively we're going to start pulling the trigger, and so that people on the reservations can go in and apply for jobs at our company. That's the type of ways we can kind of connect our visions and our goals in our community with kind of the pillars that we have here at Nielsen. It'd be so meaningful for this group to have an effect outside of the group. And that's kind of the goals can kind of cascade beyond that. And then internally, like education, how do we do that type of stuff? So we tackle the real issues. We can be a downer because there's just so much trauma. We discuss openly and factually MMIW. We post the stats openly on our boards. Say here is what happens. We use the word rape openly on the thing. And we do have to use the word trigger warning at the beginning. We do address a mascot, the token. That has sparked conversation and debate. I want to say 2 summers ago, there was an issue with Disney and the headdress. For us, as leadership, it was actually a really interesting and proud thing because we have an open board for our group. Some of our communities posted about it. They were unhappy. And another person in the community posted that they went to that school and they thought it was fine. And then our community had a whole discussion about it. And we as leaders didn't get involved because sometimes in leadership, and that was really awesome and amazing. And we've highlighted the boarding school stuff. We do Orange Shirt Day, which isn't necessarily as so much the U.S., but it's something that highlights, a major issue that is finally starting to get into the U.S. And Illuminated is doing American genocide. I love when the word genocide is used actually to represent what has happened in the U.S.
Yeah.
So we're able to openly and honestly discuss the stuff that has happened here in the U.S. or just to Indigenous people, and we have had no restraint, no pushback, we do discuss our word choices, at times to make sure we're not, but we've never had any issue. Nobody's ever said, don't say it that way, because it's true. What we're saying is true. It's just the hard truth. And I like that our company supports that we can say the truth. Everything is timely. People are learning all the time because it's just not something that's present on their Twitter feeds and their Instagram posts. And if they're not intentionally following these things, then we're, bringing it forward. We're doing a really great thing, collaboration with another group during Pride to talk about what Two-Spirit is, which I think is a beautiful thing. Typical person doesn't understand. And I would love to bring that forth to a whole new group of people who don't get it.
I feel like in organizations as large as Nielsen, having an internal focus makes such a significant impact just because of the size, but also the culture that already exists there and systems that already exist within it. It sounds like there's a really solid platform to create the business resource group for individuals who have similar passions and want to make a difference in their companies, and maybe they don't have a set process to create a working group or anything like that. If that process wasn't in place, do you feel like you would have still pursued creating a group?
I would say anybody who sees the need and has the energy, go for it. Having energy is gonna be the key, because like I said, I do this, it's not part of my job at all. It's essentially a base team of 3. And if the 3 of us stop doing it for whatever reason, so we just decide to not, then nobody's doing it. That's a matter of the fact. So you have to have the energy to do it. So I would say, even if there isn't a mechanism in place to do it, try and do it. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be loud. You can start with a small. I believe our first meeting was 7 people. It was not big, and we're a company of, I want to say, 20,000 in the U.S. Of our potential people that we could have spoke to, it's 7. That was about it. And now we're still not huge. But we're effective within the space that we are, and people, I feel like we help to educate and enlighten people. And even if it's 100 out of 20,000, that's very effective for our thing. It's meaningful to those 100 people.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an incredible day, and we'll see you next time.